evening, everyone. I'm Erin Burnett. Out front tonight, the debt bomb. Our national debt tonight, $15.6 trillion. So, you may say or sing, how did we get here? Well, check out the top 3 reasons. Number 1, the price tag for the Bush tax cuts, $1.8 trillion. Number 2, the cost of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, $1.3 trillion at this moment. A distant third, the president's stimulus plan, $831 billion. Never thought $831 billion would look cheap. Well, here's another powerful number. Right now, this country is paying $224 billion a year in interest on our debt. And that number is mushrooming. It sort of becomes an exponential problem. By 2020, we will be paying $544 billion in interest alone. And if you want to see something really scary, let's just compare that $544 billion to Medicare. By 2020, in the year we're paying $544 billion in interest, Medicare will cost a mere $279 billion. We'll be paying almost double that just in interest on our debt. Now, you may say that's clearly foul and bad and terrible things, but some people believe that spending more is the best way to actually get this country growing again, to grow out of our problem. Liberal economist Paul Krugman says the Obama stimulus plan was not big enough. He wants another $800 billion on top of what we've already spent. And he is not alone in arguing for more spending, not less. Former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers wrote in this week's Financial Times and in the Washington Post, quote, "A country that pursues austerity to the point where its economy is driven into a downward spiral does its creditors no favor." You know, as in if you keep cutting and you keep earning less, you have less money to pay back that interest, and the interest doesn't get smaller. We checked in with our out front strike team, made up of the country's top CEOs, entrepreneurs, innovators. They overwhelmingly say no to more stimulus. John Donahoe, CEO of eBay, wrote me, quote, "The biggest threat to the economy is the growing deficit. We need to get Simpson Bowles implemented soon after the election." And Stuart Miller, CEO of Lennar, the nation's second biggest home builder, told me, quote, "We need to let the free markets work and start to focus on deficit reduction." You can see more about our strike team, as always, on our blog. But now one man who has made the fight against government spending his mission, Senator Tom Coburn of Oklahoma. He's the author of the new book, appropriately titled, The Debt Bomb. Senator Coburn is out front tonight. Good to see you, sir, in person. All right, so I want to cut right to the chase here about one thing. You hate debt. We think we're in over our heads. But you are open, and this is really important to a lot of people watching, you are open to taxes, to revenue, as a way to get out of this problem. Sure. So not just cutting, as Larry Summers says, may be negative, but also raising revenue.
Yeah. Well, there's two points. One is if you want to have increased spending, the best way to have increased spending is to have the private sector do it. We have over $2 trillion sitting on the sidelines right now that is not being spent because there's no confidence that Congress is running the country in a way that will create some certitude that you would put that money at risk. So you can have a combination of revenue increases, you can flatten broaden the base and flatten the rates, and also pay for it by trimming some of the wasteful spending that nobody truly benefits other than those that are directly hired in wasting the spending. And you can accomplish what everybody wants to accomplish. But I would contend it's much better if we have that $2 trillion come into the economy than we borrow $800 billion and put it into the economy, because the market will allocate it and get better returns on it than the federal government will.
But see, it's interesting because you were part of the Gang of Six, Democrats, Republicans. You know, Mark Warner, he comes on this show, and everybody seems very reasonable. Yes, some people are going to pay more. I want another combination of things. I want cuts. All right. But then there's people like Grover Norquist, and he is, you've called it a purity test, that he sort of makes Republicans sign when they sign his pact. Why is that not helpful?
Well, first of all, it's not helpful because he's the author and developer of what a tax increase is, which is ridiculous. You know, the Senate voted for 2 of my amendments, one to eliminate the blending requirement on ethanol. He called that a tax increase. That was nothing but spending through the tax code.
It was a subsidy. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, not a subsidy. I mean, they have a subsidy besides that. Yeah. This is just a tax benefit. It's spending, and so you can't allow somebody from the outside to determine what, in fact, it is. The other thing is we eliminated a tax break for the Hollywood producers. 38 Republicans voted for that. So there's not a clear definition of what violates Mr. Norquist's code other than what he says violates it, but the vast majority of Republicans don't agree with him on what that is.
So they've sort of let their own point of view, or perhaps even the Republican Party. I mean, obviously, I remember when John Huntsman was the one who was brave, who said, I'm not going to sign the pledge.
Yeah. Well, the question is what's our commitment? Our commitment ought to be the commitment to the Constitution and a limited government that would breed the best and healthiest and most vigorous economy in the world. That ought to be our #1 oath, and that's where we sign on the line, and that's what we swear to when we come into Congress.
I want to just play a quick soundbite from Paul Krugman. He was on with Rachel Maddow last night, making the case for another $800 billion, and get your reaction. Here he is.
We've had an overwhelming vindication of the ideas that say that this is the time for governments to spend, this is the time not to cut back, the urgent priority is jobs, deficits should wait, and yet that's an argument that nobody wants to hear in power because it's inconvenient for inner circles, and I have to say, in the end, it's inconvenient for the 1% or the 0.1%.
What's your reaction to him?
Well, I go back to what I said before. First of all, where are we going to borrow the money? And what we're borrowing now, the Federal Reserve is just printing money, and the impact of $800 billion. Let's talk about what that impact is. Let's say he's right and it has some positive impact for the economy. But adding that to the debt, what that means, we got 1 in 2 college graduates right now that can't get a job, a full-time job. It means your IRA, 10 years from now, is not going to have but about half the purchasing power it has today. And it means if you have a home, the home value is going to go lower, not higher. So that's a Keynesian, pure Keynesian argument. There's no question we need increase in final demand in our society and in our economy. But the way you get there is to build the confidence and do the things as Congress to get people the money that's sitting on the side now. If you look at the numbers, the velocity of money right now, and I'm not sure all your listeners are familiar with that, but the fact is we're at the lowest level we've ever recorded in terms of velocity. It means all the money's sitting there to be loaned, but there's no demand for it. So the reason there's no demand is because there's no confidence. Our biggest deficit is a deficit of leadership, both in Congress and at the White House, because we have to rebuild confidence in this country. And we ought to have leadership that's talking about, here's the problems, they're all solvable, let's work together to solve them.
All right, well, Senator, thank you very much. And obviously, Senator Coburn, member of the Gang of Six, Republicans, Democrats, working together. And we hope that there's a lot more of that, as you said, book called Debt Bomb. Out Front Story 2 is next. Still out front.